It is what did I say? Welcome back to the House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development, Wednesday afternoon at 1:50. And we are going to welcome some conversations from Vermont State Colleges. And I think we're going to start with Drake. Are you?
Is that all right if we sit up there together?
Certainly, yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
I saw that.
We heard that body heat might be helpful.
You're right, Benedict.
Don't encourage us.
Folks, my name is Drake Turner, and I'm the Director of External and Governmental Affairs for the Vermont State Colleges System.
And I'm Sharon Scott. I'm the Chief Financial and Operating Officer for the Vermont State Colleges.
And I should have joined the Zoom before I sat down, but we wanted to share some slides with you all this afternoon, if that's all right.
Please.
Great. So wait till I'm let in. And we were hoping to provide you all a little bit of an update on what's been going on at the Vermont State Colleges System, a brief overview of the system, and then dive into our budget request if that works for the committee.
Great.
Screen. Okay, perfect. So great, we're really excited to have the opportunity to speak with you all this afternoon. The Vermont State Colleges System has a brand new chancellor, Elizabeth Malk, who is unable to join us this afternoon, but she sends her regrets and is excited to work with you all. She just started in the beginning of January, so there's a lot of new and exciting leadership at the Vermont State Colleges System. So we're excited to speak with you all about what's been happening across the system. I'm going to start and then turn things over to Sharon, who will go through our FY25 budget request. And we're open to any questions that you may have as we sort of go along, or can wait till the end. So we really just want to share some exciting recent news on our campuses. I know it's been a while since, well, this is my first time sitting in front of you all in this role. But it's been a while since you've heard an official, update from us as to what's been happening across the system. So we want to just take a few moments to share some of the highlights. The first thing we're really excited to report is, as you all know, the Vermont State Colleges System has been transforming to meet the needs of our students, faculty, staff, as well as our Vermont communities. And I should say, I'll also submit these slides to your committee so you can all look at them later. There's a lot of information on here. So one of the major outcomes of the transformation work that you all have been such strong supporters and leaders on has been a major unification of our four-year institutions into Vermont State University. So now we have two institutions, the Community Colleges of Vermont and Vermont State University. And Vermont State University launched in July of last year. So that was a really big effort. We're definitely grateful for your support in getting Vermont State University off the ground. And we're really excited to welcome the inaugural VTSU class of 2027 in this past fall. We were able to meet our enrollment projections for that first class and welcomed 1,400 undergraduate students onto our campuses. And I just want to share a little bit about what that class looks like. When we're looking at the class of 2027, 52% of the students that make up that class identify as first-generation college students. 53% are Pell eligible. 19% identify as BIPOC students, and 70% of this inaugural class are Vermonters. So we're really excited to see what they get up to and, welcome future classes into this new unified institution. I know nursing is a major issue or, profession that this committee and many committees across the legislature are focused on. We see our role as doing whatever we can to support the education and, creation of new nurses to go and care for Vermonters. And we're really excited to announce that the Vermont State University is embarking on a major expansion to our nursing programs. This really highlights the ability of the Vermont State Colleges System and VTSU to be able to be agile to meet workforce needs. And this expansion has been made possible with funding secured by Senator Leahy, congressionally directed spending, as well as some funding from the legislature. So it's a multi-year expansion of our nursing programs. And once it's been fully realized, we will go from enrolling around 676 nursing students to nearly 1,000 once that's finished. And that program is a stackable credential, which means that folks can really enter at many different places. So they can start with a certificate and move all the way up to a master's degree. So it's a really powerful program.
Can I just ask what the size of the award, the CDS award was?
I took
We
it out of
received
this slide.
$6 million.
Wow, okay,
So
thank you.
it was an incredibly generous award, and we are very excited about what we can do with that in terms of expanding nursing here in the state of Vermont. We're incredibly grateful to Senator Leahy shepherding us through that process.
And multi-year means what's the date that you feel like this program will be at its full?
We think it'll take about 3 years to be fully realized. We do need to do some physical construction in order to be able to actually physically expand for the program. As you may already know, one of the limiting factors in nursing is the access to simulation and simulation equipment. It's vital for candidates in nursing to be able to have that practice prior to their getting their actual in-person practicums and working in the hospitals and nursing homes. And so that will require our ability to be able to do that. But we are looking at it, that will probably take about 3 years for us to ramp up like that.
And around the simulation equipment, you all passed in the BAA the ability for us to use some funding to go toward the purchasing of that simulation equipment, which we're really grateful for.
Did you have a question about that?
With respect to the students who are in this new or continuing program, are they mostly Vermonters, or are they out of state, or do you have any statistics?
They're primarily Vermonters. So particularly for the stackable credential programs that begin with the PN programs and work their way up, they're most frequently adult learners. Now, we do have a traditional 4-year residential program housed at our Castleton location, but many of our students, particularly those who are coming in and out in terms of increasing their credentials as they move forward, are adult learners who are embedded in their communities. They may already be working in a hospital or a nursing home, and this is their ability to be able to increase their skill level and increase their work at the existing facility that they work in. So the vast majority of our graduates end up getting their license and practicing here in the state of Vermont, which is very exciting.
One follow-up. The different locations around the state.
Do we have a slide on that?
We do, yeah. So once we get past the news slides, we have a sort of a breakdown of the different campus locations of both institutions. But we'd be happy to give you more information. And if you're interested in more specific data points around, the number of nurses who are, or the percentage of our nursing students who are licensed in Vermont, we're happy to provide that to you. Also want to highlight this exciting partnership. We've been working hand in hand with Vermont State University, CCV, and the UVM Health Network to revitalize our respiratory therapy training program. That one's always a little bit of a mouthful for me. This is the only program of its kind in Vermont. And we're really excited in the partnership here between those 3 institutions. UVM Health Network is providing financial support for this program. CCV provides students with the prerequisites that are required prior to enrolling. And then VTSU is really focused on expanding enrollment for folks to be able to access this program. So we'll be excited to share more with you as it sort of gets rolling, but wanted to highlight that as well. Some of you who I've worked with in my previous role at Let's for Kids know that early childhood education is near and dear to my heart, but also it's a sector of the economy and our workforce that's really important to the Vermont State Colleges system. So we wanted to highlight, we know there's an acute need for early childhood educators in Vermont. The legislation you all passed last year makes major investments, and one of the major barriers to the accessibility of childcare is the lack of early educators to care for children. So we are really invested in these programs. Our early childhood education programs continue to see really high enrollment and interest across both institutions within the system. And we're also really proud of the graduates of those programs who are leaders in their communities. So wanted to highlight Tammy Gosley, who is a 2021 graduate. of our VTSU online early childhood education degree program, who was named the Early Childhood Educator of the Year in Vermont this year. So these are our programs that we continue to be really invested in, and we are excited to play our part in transforming our childcare system in Vermont.
Right.
Sure.
So Drake, earlier you said, 1,400 students on the campus, and this is an online program. How does all that work?
I believe the inaugural, and Sharon, you correct me if I'm wrong, but our inaugural class of 2027 is comprised of 1,400 students, but we're moving really toward more of a hybrid model where students are able to access courses in person, online, or in combination. So the unification of those campuses makes it a lot easier for students to find the path that works for them within the Vermont State University and the Vermont State College system generally. But there are a lot of ways that we want to meet students where they are in accessing the pathway that works for them. But I'm not sure I want to add anything to that.
So just to put a little bit finer point on it, those 1,400 students include both online students and students that we would consider in person or face to face. And that is because of really the way that we are teaching our students. Certainly the early childhood program is one that we really focus on as an online program with some intensive residencies, simply because that particular program is really within the incumbent workforce. And so the best way to meet that workforce is through an online modality.
Thank you.
I also want to spotlight a program that actually your neighbors across the hall heard about last week, which is a program at CCV they've recently launched, and it's kind of been a long time coming. There were some delays with COVID, but they've launched a corrections post-secondary education initiative. And within that program, CCV is partnering with the Department of Corrections to actually deliver courses to Vermonters who are incarcerated, as well as staff at those facilities. So it's a joint effort to really reduce our Vermont recidivism rate and also support workforce development and build opportunities for folks. It was established and is currently utilizing a federal grant from the Department of Justice, but once those funds have been expended, the program is designed to be self-sustaining. So the House Corrections and Institutions Committee heard some really great testimony on that program last week.
Thank you. Just to expand on that, I am curious, are the correction staff and the incarcerated individuals attending the same classes simultaneously? Is it virtual? Is it?
That's a great question, and no, they're not. So my understanding is that the correction staff are able to access courses at different locations or online, but the individuals who are incarcerated are taking in-person courses at those facilities. And I think there are plans to continue to innovate to maybe offer more of a hybrid model for folks who are incarcerated in a way that's safe and appropriate. So I know that CCV has been working really closely with the Department of Corrections to get the tech upgrades that need to happen in those facilities. But yeah, those two populations are not taking courses at the same time.
Thank you.
And then you might have said this, I'm sorry, the correction folks who are incarcerated can they get degrees? Are they just?
I believe so. I think right now it's really a few courses that are offered at a time. But certainly, if folks were, needing maybe a couple of credits here or there, those are courses that could lead to a degree. And students, to be able to participate in those programs, need to have a high school diploma or equivalency to be able to be eligible.
Following Edie's question, are they also eligible for certification?
I believe so, although I may just want to double check with Joyce Judy, the president of CCV, and the staff on that program who recently testified. So if there are any questions that folks have, I'm happy to facilitate the answers to those. They're really excited about that program.
I was just going to add for colleagues who worked here during the last biennium, we did the big workforce bill and had a piece of very intentional about workforce for folks who are currently incarcerated coming out. And some of the research that myself and another member who's no longer on this committee did on this is that a lot of folks overall don't stay long enough, are not in the facility long enough to actually get their degree. And so while this is a major leg up to be able to hopefully transition once they are transitioning back into communities anyway, the fact that they can now use Pell Grants, et cetera, this is really all starting to come back online, which is great. But just as one thought for the timeline most, I can't say all, but most folks we learn won't be in there long enough to, in a prison to actually get their degree.
So just following along with that, the fact now that incarcerated individuals, when they come out, can use use a Pell Grant to help with education by connecting the community college to the individuals who are currently incarcerated, regardless of how long they are in custody and taking classes there. That ability to be able to have that connection, that close connection with advising and individuals from the community college allows us to be able to help perhaps do some of that bridging. And I think that's one of the things that we're most excited about, is that potential possibility of looking at that linkage beyond what's happening while they're incarcerated to how this can help Vermonters as we move forward. So it's really, at the moment, in some ways a pilot, but as Drake noted, this really has been designed to be a self-sustaining project that allows us to be able to move that forward. So I think all of those parts together make it really potentially helpful for Vermont's workforce.
And just a food for thought, when I visited the main prison, they have the courses to help folks make that transition from high school to college also, and they find that it helps the success. So just food for thought.
Yeah, it's a great flag. Thank you. All right, one more recent news and then we'll move on to the next section. But I really appreciate the robust discussion about this. So the last thing we really want to highlight here, and this is by no means everything that's been happening on our campuses, is really proud of the work that CCV and the McClure Foundation are doing to support first generation college students and also really get into high schools to show our high school students, even sometimes in middle school as well, that there are a lot of pathways for them to access higher education. We know that there are many barriers that keep folks from pursuing higher education, but chief among them is the cost of that education. So we're continuing to do everything we can to ensure that cost isn't the barrier that's keeping folks from accessing our programs. One way that we do that is through our early college programs, and those exist at CCV and Vermont State University. There are a number of programs. But this past fall, we had more than 235 high school seniors from 90% of Vermont's high schools and tech centers enrolled in early college at the Community College of Vermont, which is really exciting. And I know there's a lot of work being done in the education committees and across the House and Senate to really ensure that we're meeting high school graduates to support them in pursuing higher education, because we lose a lot of folks after they graduate from high school, and we want to do whatever we can to meet students where they are and show them what pathways might be possible to them. Great. I'm going to do a quick overview and then pass things over to Sharon. Sharon really has helped me with this Venn diagram as I started in this role back in December. But we want to sort of show you a snapshot of what this system really looks like. So the Vermont State College system, as you all know, is made up of two complementary institutions. So we have the Community College of Vermont, as well as Vermont State University, which used to be, Castleton, Linden, Johnson, Vermont Technical College. And both of those institutions are overseen by the Office of the Chancellor. So our Chancellor, Beth Malk, serves as essentially the CEO of this system. She directs activities for the two presidents of CCV and VTSU, oversees the shared services of the system, establishes external affairs and direction. And she also establishes and implements board policy and coordinates system academics. So we also want to just do a little bit of numbers here about what our student headcount looks like. There's been a lot of attention and time and focus on the unification of Vermont State University in our conversations with you over the years, because that was such a big body of work. But we also do want to share that when you're looking at the headcount of our students, 55% of the students within the Vermont State College system are actually within the Community College of Vermont. So both of these institutions are really essential to the functioning of the system. I know a lot of folks are interested in the percent of Vermonters who are enrolled at our institutions. And I mentioned at Vermont State University, 70% of enrolled students are Vermonters. When you look at the Community College of Vermont, that number jumps to more than 90% of students who are Vermonters. And many of those who aren't classified as Vermonters is because it's their first year in Vermont and they plan to continue here. So these are our two institutions that are really serving our state and fortifying our workforce and hopefully supporting folks to come here and stay here. And also with across both institutions, we have 50% or greater Pell eligible students across the system. And then the last thing I want to highlight on this slide is our shared services. So the shared services within the Vermont State Colleges system really support both institutions. And you can see here, you know, IT, human resources, finance, libraries, and legal services. So these, the transition to shared services, I think, has really supported the operations of both institutions and also has allowed us to realize some efficiencies across the entire system. This is another snapshot of what this system looks like. So you can see here there, I apologize that the Vermont State University photo isn't labeled, but we have campuses and academic centers where students can access education across the state. And that is intentional so that we meet students where they are. If they need in-person instruction online, something in their backyard, we really want to be able to create realistic and robust opportunities for Vermonters and folks who come to us from out of state to be able to access the education they want in a way that works for them. I want to highlight just for a moment that the Vermont State Colleges system is governed by a board of trustees. They set expectations for the chancellor and oversee the transformation process we're currently in. And our board composition includes, you know, leaders in business, community leaders, higher ed experts, and a lot of change management experts from across the state. And we also have 4 legislative trustees who are elected by you all. I know the next election is actually tomorrow morning. And that's really our link to the legislature. The Vermont State College system was created by the legislature, I believe in 1961. So we're really incredibly grateful for the partnership that we have with you all and the support that the legislature has given to the Vermont State College system. And our current legislative trustees until tomorrow are Representative Lynn Dickinson, who's the chair of our board, Representative David Durfee, Representative Jim Maslin, and then former Representative Bill Lippert. I mentioned our leadership here. So Beth Mauk is the photo on the left. She's the chancellor of the system. And then I think a lot of you folks will recognize Joyce Judy, who's the president of CCV. She's been a longstanding leader at that institution. And at Vermont State University, we, back in the fall, welcomed a new interim president, David Berg. So hopefully if you haven't met them yet, hopefully you'll get to meet them throughout the session. And then the last slide for me is just a quick snapshot of what our student head count looks like over the past academic year. On an annual basis, we're bringing more than 15,000 students through, or 15,000 learners through a course or a program. And then we also support 3,700 non-credit or workforce development students. So when you combine that over an academic year, we're educating over 19,000 students, which I think is something that we're really proud of. There's been a lot of hard work that's happened over the past few years. I think all of that has been done to support these students and our faculty and staff across the system. We know there's more work ahead. Sharon's going to talk a little bit about that, but we're just incredibly grateful for the support of this body. We would not be where we are if it wasn't for all of the work that you've done, and it's really to support these students. So
I just have a quick question. So those 19,000 learners, those are folks who are taking one course or they may not be on a degree track either, right? It could be a course or certificate or a degree.
correct. Yes.
And specifically for the 3,700 workforce learners, they may be in an apprenticeship program, like our plumbing or electrical apprenticeship program. It could be in another related program. Typically, they will lead to something of a certificate, or that might lead to licensure in something, but it may not be for credit. That's why we've separated them into 2 different paths. They are really intended to be directly professional related as it relates to those particular programs. So I am going to just ask just a quick question of you as to, so we have a little section on transformation and then turning to the budget, but I do want to be respectful of your time. Would you like us to talk a little bit about transformation and then budget, or, okay, you're okay with it?
I think we have time.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to just take us back in time with a little bit of history. I know that I haven't had the pleasure of being in this committee before. So it's really a great opportunity for me to say hello to you. But I'm going to take us back to the spring of 2020, when the world was shut down due to COVID. And the Vermont State Colleges, frankly, was on the brink of financial insolvency at that time. The chancellor at that time had recommended the closure of 3 complete campuses. And the reaction was very swift and very fierce from our communities, the faculty and staff, and frankly, from this legislative body. The recommendation was quickly withdrawn, and you, as a General Assembly, took some really direct actions right away. You requested studies from the Joint Fiscal Office and the State Treasurer, and then based on the results of those, you created the Select Committee on the Future of Public Higher Education in Vermont. And since that time, the Vermont State Colleges has really been focused on a complete system transformation. And we've been really working hand in hand with you in the legislature, with the governor and with the state to achieve financial sustainability. And by keeping our education accessible for Vermonters in our rural communities and better serving the state of Vermont. The work has been essential, but we also know that it's been extremely difficult, and especially for our faculty and staff and students, many of whom are my friends and colleagues. I have been working for the Vermont State Colleges for 20 years, and I was embedded on these college locations, and I was in frankly one of the college locations that was targeted for closure back in 2020. So I feel keenly the changes that were proposed. Where we are right now is a really remarkable demonstration of our teamwork. We're very proud of the efforts that we've undertaken, and we know that there's much more that we need to do in order to be able to achieve true financial sustainability, and we can only do that with your partnership. The transformation itself, the steps that went through there, we actually launched our process back in the fall of 2020, when the Select Committee was established. And with that, work groups leveraging the talent of our faculty, staff, students, leadership, outside experts, and others really brought forward ideas and plans about how we could operate and transform ourselves most efficiently and sustainably. And those ideas really informed the plans that we implemented and that we are advancing and have been advancing for the last few years. Since the close of the 2023 legislature, we've been hard at work to continue our transformation efforts, and we're excited to report that we have successfully launched and achieved accreditation for Vermont State University, as Drake noted earlier. That was an enormous accomplishment, and it frankly took us 2.5 years to get there. It's a huge undertaking. We also met those projected enrollment targets that we had for new and returning students for the current fiscal year. And we established plans this past fall to optimize course offerings and really chart a multi-year path to financial sustainability. We've also launched our facilities master planning process, which is currently underway, and we're continuing conversations on our campus communities. And finally, this past fall, we released our Optimization 2.0 for academics and an administrative optimization plan. And these plans are ones that help us achieve financial sustainability. Last week, we were able to announce the expansion of our nursing program, which is one way that we intend to be growing the Vermont State College. In terms of where we are, and a little bit of background, when we talk about our optimization plans, academic optimization really is intended to result in about $3.35 million worth of savings. It's really focused on bringing our academic offerings more in line with our peer institutions. When we looked at them at the start of this process, we recognized that we were almost 2.5 times the number of academic offerings as peer institutions of similar size and scope. You can imagine that that's extremely costly and something that we needed to be able to address. But we also wanted to really look at what does the average class size look like? So when we looked at what it was for Vermont State University, we noted that it was about 1 instructor to every 13 students, so a 1 to 13 faculty student ratio. The norm for institutions of our size is somewhere around 1 to 18 or 1 to 20. And so what we wanted to do was to target our ability to be able to have a larger average class size. And what that involved for us is the reduction of 26 full-time faculty members using a voluntary buyout program. And so as of the end of this academic year, 26 faculty members have elected to take a voluntary buyout plan, which will allow us to have a smaller workforce this coming fall. In terms of, yes,
How does the reduction in staff impact students who are pursuing specific degrees?
every student will be able to continue to conclude their degree in the degree that they have today. So what we are saying is that for academic programs that we are identifying as potentially sunsetting or closing, we will not be accepting new students into those programs, but every student is entitled to receive their academic program to the conclusion of their program.
Thank you.
And so we will be ensuring that that happens. The second part of our work is administrative optimization, and that's a long way of saying we are making ourselves more efficient from an administrative perspective. That's intended to save about $3.1 million, and it involves the reduction of 33 full-time positions at the executive, management, and supervisory level. Every level of our organization was looked at. And so that is the work that is currently ongoing. 3/4 of those individuals who were identified as part of the administrative optimization left the employ of the Vermont State Colleges at the end of the calendar year, and then the remainder will be leaving at the end of this academic year. We are also making adjustments to our shared services functions to bring down those costs. And all of this is being done to allow us to be able to be more nimble and streamlined, because we recognize that as part of the work and our partnership with the legislature, we not only can request increases to general fund, but we also need to take control of our own finances. And that comes through really looking carefully at the work that we are doing.
I'm curious in terms of the balancing act between the community college and the state VSU. There was that Venn diagram that you showed that had the different percentages of FTEs. Will there be, as a result of the voluntary buyout program and the administrative optimization, some balancing out or evening out of those differences, or is it just the nature of the community college system versus?
So
Yes.
it is a nature of a community college versus a 4-year public institution. Community colleges do tend to have very large numbers of students who may come in and take 1 or 2 classes. People who dip into education and dip out because they need to have an additional credential or some additional learning in order to be able to advance in their career. And so they may only have the ability to be able to come in and take a couple of courses versus what typically will come into the university, where there will be a higher proportion of students who will be enrolled half, 3/4, or full time, looking for achieving a degree in a shorter period of time. So that is partly the nature of it in terms of the number of headcount. When you look at the full-time equivalents, so while it's 55% is the headcount of the total population is at the community college, only 38% of the full-time equivalencies are at the community college. So that's really just about the volume of the number of credits that these students are taking. It is frankly the nature of a community college, and it's what it's designed for. It's designed to be able to allow students to dip in and dip out of the learning in a way that allows them to increase their credentials.
Thank you.
In terms of our path towards financial sustainability, we have a clear goal and expectation that we must have a balanced budget by the FY27 budget. So our progress thus far, so through the current fiscal year that we are in, FY24, is that we have achieved the first $10 million in savings, and our institutions are actively working on achieving the next $5 million. So our goal was $5 million in savings. each year for 5 years to get to $25 million in savings. So we had our first review with our Finance and Facilities Committee this past week. They are within $2 million of hitting that target. And we do 3 passes at the budget. They will hit that target before the end of this fiscal year. And before that budget is approved by our Board of Trustees. As I noted, the academic optimization and the administrative optimization are expected to yield a little more than $6 million in savings. And then we anticipate that there's additional work in terms of looking at our total compensation, our physical footprint, additional efficiency improvements, and other activities that really will allow us to continue to drive down to achieve the last $10 million in savings over these next 2 years. In terms of our budget request, so that's the background. Now we get to the heart of it. In terms of our budget request, for our FY25 request, we have it in 3 specific parts. The first is an increase to the general fund appropriation. The second is an adjustment to the global commitment funds for our allied health programs. And then the third is one-time support for bridge funding and a continuation of CCV's tuition advantage program. In terms of a base appropriation increase, we're requesting a 10% increase to our base appropriation, which is currently a combined total of $48 million over using both lines B.602 and B.602.2. The Select Committee's recommendation was to move the Vermont State Colleges to a base appropriation of $48 million, which the General Assembly has been able to do, and we're incredibly grateful for that support. However, in the fall of 2020, when that recommendation was developed, it was predicated on the economic factors that were occurring at that time. At that time, the Consumer Price Index was averaging 1.7% per year, and no one anticipated, frankly, no one anticipated at all that the economy would overheat like it did post-COVID. All of the investments that the federal government put into the COVID response and other things really resulted in a massive increase in inflation. And so instead of averaging a 1.7% increase in the Consumer Price Index, we actually have seen an average of a 4.7% increase in the Consumer Price Index each year. What that's meant is that the cumulative total of anticipated increases in inflation versus what actually occurred is a difference of about 9.6%. So what we're asking for is a 10% adjustment to our base appropriation to put us in line with what the Select Committee anticipated the purchasing power of that $48 million would be. We're incredibly grateful for the governor's recommendation of 3%. That is very much in line with his recommendations elsewhere. But we do feel that this catch-up payment would allow us to be able to continue to safely and strategically transform the Vermont State Colleges. The second thing that we're asking for, and the governor's budget does recommend this, is combining B.602 and B.602.2 into a single line. Today, it's 2 separate lines. So you'll see 30.5 as B.602 and 17.5 right now as B.602.2. And that's shown as transformation. Over the last several years, as you as a body have increased our appropriation, you have done so in that line and held the original base appropriation line the same. The intent all along has been to combine the two, and the governor's recommendation is to combine those. And we are in strong support of making that happen. And then lastly, in B.603, we receive funds to support our allied health programs. So specifically, this helps support our dental hygiene and nursing programs. And what we're asking for is an increase to the global commitment funds. And so those global commitment funds come out of your Medicaid funding. They are not part of your general fund. And so this would be a twofold request. The first is to increase the global commitment funds to 1.5 million. And then the second would be actually to reduce our general fund slightly in order to be able to cover the match for the additional increase in the global commitment. We had originally proposed it to the governor's office in a slightly different way. They came back with this. It's actually a better proposal, because what this would allow us to do is we don't actually have to write a check back to the state for the match component, which is what we would have had to do. So this actually just takes care of it all behind the scenes, which is our current global commitment funding is taken care of with the state. So those are the ongoing aspects of our budget. And I'll pause for a second to see if you have any questions on this before I move on.
Did we share these slides? with-
This, I'm gonna email them after, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, cool.
I saw you. I'm make sure you have all of this.
I actually do have one, just in the budget language, there is the $427,000, almost $28,000 carve out for VMAC.
Yes, so we don't typically make a request for that. So I don't normally bring that forward to you, but yes, the carve out for VMAC very specifically is to support the VMAC programs, and we would continue to do so. So our next part of our requests are for one-time related funding. So the first is that over the past few years, we have shared with you in the General Assembly the transformation plan that was created by the Select Committee and adopted by our Board of Trustees. And that plan included bridge funding for each of the 5 years of transformation. So as we were reducing our $25 million structural deficit, there were bridge funds to help support the Vermont State Colleges in order to be able to make sure that we could continue to operate. For FY25, that plan includes $10 million in bridge funding, and for FY26, an additional $5 million. So in B.1100B1, we're requesting bridge funding consistent with that stated plan, so $10 million. At present, the governor's budget includes $5 million for bridge funding. And we know that this is an extremely challenging year financially for Vermont. However, these funds really allow the VSC the time and space necessary to adopt really truly strategic changes in structure without having to compromise on quality or make changes so quickly that it has a detrimental effect on student learning. Not having these funds would really limit our ability to make these changes in that really safe and sustainable way. So the next part is in B1100B2. We're requesting $5 million to continue the pilot that CCV has been doing on the Vermont Tuition Advantage Program. The Tuition Advantage Program offers a 50% discount to students enrolled in specific programs that are really suitable for Vermont's workforce. And this year, that program has served about 2,800 students. Of these, about 1,000 of these students would have been not eligible for any other program, such as 802 Opportunity. Thus really giving these students an edge by allowing them to have a discounted tuition rate for these critical programs as we move forward. The governor's budget put forward $1 million to support this particular project, and we are requesting $5 million.
So just looking at the bridge funding, my question that I was going to wait until the end, but is you're making big changes, right? Big changes to the structure, and it's just started, right? Like at end of last year, now it's going, with staffing, with all of that. So I'm curious, pinch points that you're noticing. I'm curious what kind of reaction you're getting from folks on campus. I'm curious because every time, I shouldn't say every time, often over the past few years, as changes have been pushed out, as this is going to happen, there has been an uprising on the campus community, or as part of the campus community. And so I'm curious how it's going, right? Like, and I don't know that we want to do this right in the middle of this, but when you're talking about the bridge funding, that kind of was the trigger for me that said,
Right.
okay, so there are pieces, right? There are pieces
Right.
that I'm assuming temporary positions or, right, like what is, because $5 million is a lot of money for bridge funds.
Right.
Or 5
So
million more dollars?
$5 million more is a lot. So
Tens.
it's an enormous amount.
Yep.
And we recognize that. And you have been incredibly generous in bridge funding with the Vermont State Colleges for the last several years. How is it going in terms of transformation? We have had really clear expectations and plans about what we need to achieve. And one of the biggest ones was the creation of Vermont State University as of July 1. And that has been, in many respects, a really singular focus these last few years. There is so much, while it sounds simple, there's the technology work that has to go to redevelop all of the systems, the accreditation work, the program and academic work that the faculty need to do, et cetera. So there's all of this particular work that has been happening. And we were successfully able to accomplish that. That being said, this is such a disruptive change that there is no way that it can be done without making mistakes. And frankly, we recognize that mistakes were made. And we really have attempted to really learn from that. Our new chancellor is really focused on being inclusive in communication with our faculty and staff. In fact, the reason she's not here today is that she is spending, she started yesterday and she's at our Johnson location and she's there all day today. And meeting with community members and individual faculty and staff and students and having that opportunity to really engage with the community. And I think the new president that we have at Vermont State University is also really engaged in that. And our board has been really focused on saying, how do we make sure that this is inclusive as possible? Recognizing that we do have to make difficult and really challenging decisions, but that we have to be inclusive and really be thinking about how we continue to live with this. I know I mentioned I started here 20 years ago. These are my community as well. And so it's really important that we do everything we can to keep the members of the community engaged in the process and recognize that we have to continue to have those conversations. So definitely, I'd love to say that we have never made a mistake. It's not true. But we have learned from them and we will continue to learn from them. Because as much as I'd love to say we'll never make another one, it's inevitable. And our goal is to keep learning and to keep making sure we include.
I'm sorry.
So then my follow-up is, bridge funding is temporary. So what is the end date for
So-
requesting bridge funding? Is this a 1-year thing and next year will be?
So,
Is this
so FY25, we're requesting 10 million. We already know we are requesting 5 million for FY26, and we will be requesting 0 million after that. Because the expectation is we will have a balanced budget. So what we have worked for over these last several years is to say, we need to get to a balanced budget by FY27, and bridge funding will cease at that time. But it's a tall order. We will still, after we approve this budget, we will still have $10 million more to close that gap before FY27.
Thank you. Just two questions. One, do you have a breakout of like what exactly bridge funding comprises in terms of personnel, operating expenses, facilities, admin, indirect? That's my first question. And the second question is, were your facilities, any of them, impacted by the summer flooding or subsequent flooding?
So first question, the bridge funding really, so when we are working with our Board of Trustees, the bridge funding will be closing our budget deficit. So it is really supporting the ongoing operations of the Vermont State Colleges. So we are anticipating that our Board of Trustees will approve a budget that is a budgeted deficit of $10 million for the coming fiscal year. That budget, the bridge funding would come in and undergird that and allow us to be able to operate with that. So there isn't a specific target for what that is. It is operations. Failing to have that means that we would need to find another source to be able to continue to operate and cover the deficit.
Sure, but a breakout of the expense sheet in terms of the operations, like what comprises the deficit in and of itself? Like, is it because of, the cost to accommodate a campus or classes or upfront, the cost of rent for facility, the deficit. I'm tired, I apologize, but like the expenses accrued that result in a deficit
Right,
don't come from, it's not just a mass or a mass of nothing. It is comprised of many different
Right.
disparate things.
right. So about 65% of our overall expenses are personnel. And so it really comes down to personnel. This is really what it comes down to. And that's why the optimization efforts in terms of academic and administrative optimization were so vital to us, because we recognize that while people are our greatest asset, which they absolutely are, they are also simultaneously our greatest expense.
Sure.
And so we have to be as efficient as we can in terms of academic and administrative delivery to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students. But in terms of a breakdown, yes, what we share with our Board of Trustees is here's the breakdown on an institutional basis of what our supplies and services, et cetera. We do not do a detailed line item breakdown with our board, but we do talk about that. And I'd be happy to sit down at any point if you are interested. And if you could refresh my memory on your second question. Flooding. Yes, we did have some issues of flooding on our campuses. Not so much the flooding of properties, so much as damage that occurred from them. We did have a transformer on one of our campuses that was essentially flooded out. We had some roof issues and we had issues with skylights. We have been fortunate to be able to get that covered largely with insurance. But we recognize that it continues to be an issue. The great news is that particularly for our Johnson location, we were actually able to be the emergency recovery location for the town and village of Johnson. And for several months after the flood, housed their town and village offices, FEMA, and a variety of other things. So we're very grateful to be up on the hill, so to speak, as it relates to that.
A couple of quick questions. So you're requesting bridge funding, but at the same time, you're cutting $5 million from your budget. Is that right?
Yes.
And then the Vermont Tuition Advantage Scholarship Program, is that in addition to the 802 scholarship programs?
Yes. So 802 Opportunity is actually a VSAC program. So this is an addition. So the students receiving this particular scholarship, if they're eligible for 802, the scholarship is applied first, and then 802 Opportunity picks up the remainder of their tuition.
How many students take advantage of both of those programs?
About 1,800 of the 2,800 students are taking advantage of both programs.
Thanks. That's good.
In terms of just a handful of programs that you funded last year, you funded 3 programs last year. A restorative justice program, 3D technology, and some critical occupation scholarships, all of which are focused on our workforce. And recognizing the challenge with this year's budget, we are not making a request to add additional programs like this, but we did want to take a moment and just give you a little bit of an update in terms of where these programs actually are. So for our 3D Tech program in FY24, $1.5 million was appropriated to support this certificate program. And the purpose of it is to introduce traditional college students, working adults, and high school students to the core technologies of 3D imaging and modeling and printing. These courses are designed to be accessible to the non-technical audience, recognizing that non-technical folks need to know this stuff too, and delivered from the Castleton, Linden, and Randolph campuses. Currently, where we are right now, the certificate and the curriculum have been developed and approved by our faculty assembly. The certificate has been solicited to high school teachers and curriculum at an open house that was held last summer. And the requisite equipment has been ordered to support the course offerings for this current fiscal year, calendar year. And high school students, we're really excited to say, will be participating in the first summer residential program. And so we're really excited to see how this works out. In terms of our restorative justice program, you appropriated $500,000 to support funding for the development of a Bachelor of Science in Restorative Justice that could to be delivered statewide. And in addition to the BS program, we're also currently developing a certificate program for learners who are not able to engage in the full baccalaureate program but would also count towards the BS. So someone who wanted to come in, maybe get a certificate and then come back later and finish the program. It's being developed for traditional age students as well as working adults, recognizing that we need to be able to address all learners. Currently, the program has been developed and it has been approved by our Board of Trustees as of January. We've identified space on our Linden campus to support restorative justice circle instruction. And the program has been really been able to be in a position where we're going to offer courses this summer. So we're very excited. Critical occupations, again, this has been generously supported by you for the last several years. And in the fall of 2023, we supported 433 students. And the eligibility for this program, because of limits in terms of the total availability of funds, we had to limit this to individuals who with a family income of $75,000 or less. So that's consistent with the 802 Opportunity Scholarship Program. And we're also really excited to note that 70% of the scholarships were awarded to students in nursing and clinical mental health programs, two areas of focus here in the state of Vermont that are absolutely vital to our success. Last but not least, I mentioned the Vermont Tuition Advantage Program, which was funded with $4 million this past year as a pilot program. And this offers 50% tuition discount in certain CCV programs that are in high demand and high need. As we noted before, we supported over 2,800 students in terms of this particular program. And the three programs with the most students receiving this are in our health science, behavioral science, and early childhood education programs. So we're seeing some really good traction as it relates to that. Last but not least, this is just for your reference for later. This is just a single page with a single spreadsheet of all the information all on one individual page, but we don't need to review that. So we really look forward to working with you, and we would be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Any other questions?
I have one. So last summer, I believe it was, the NAACP chapter on Castleton College came to the State House concerned about racial issues on campus. And I'm curious what happened with that. I'm curious if you could follow up on that. There was an issue a year ago, Martin Luther King Day, that there was the word is escaping me right now, but a campus, all campus meeting where some folks were leading the charge, and there were no folks of no BIPOC folks part of presentation. They were brought in at the very last minute. It was not smooth. There were issues with racial training on campus and racial equity training on campus. And so I'm just curious, like, did this rise to your level of knowledge? Is this something that is being looked at seriously?
Well, first of all,
I want that too, because I actually raised the same question. We're doing the trustee vote tomorrow. We asked this question in our House Progressive Caucus. So the students who, I was part of that same meeting, did not hear back from administration nor the board. And so I just would like to know if there has been communication with these students. And if not, I personally would also just like to get an update, even if you don't know the answer today, because it was pretty upsetting to see that the students on this campus couldn't even hear from administration. It was seemed very dismissive. I don't use words, but they were very clear that there was really poor communication and care with them.
this past spring.
It was last spring, and then they told us this fall. So it's this is, I think I got the timeline right? Yeah.
So
Last spring.
So I can give a little bit of an update, but we will absolutely follow up and make sure that we answer this fully. I do know that President Berg was very aware of this issue when Martin Luther King Day celebrations were being planned for the campus for this current year. And in fact, while it doesn't normally rise to my level, it is something that came to my attention because of how important this particular issue is. And I do know that he very much was addressing it on the Castleton location and taking it very, very seriously. But we will find out more information for you and get back to you. I want to make sure we give you absolutely specific information. There was a lot that was going on last spring and in this fall that it is really clear that this was not handled well. And he is taking it extraordinarily seriously. It was also brought to the attention of our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Social Justice Committee of the Board of Trustees, and was something that was discussed there. And so we are following up to make sure that this is being thoroughly addressed.
And I'll just to, one of the pieces that was particularly disturbing was that the racial equity training was inaccurate in what actually is harassment and isn't harassment. So I feel like that's something that, please include that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I in particular would like to note the students have actually, what has been communicated back to the students. I think it's one thing if the president's been talking with the staff to the whomever on the board, but students, I just really want to make sure the students are hearing back from their own institution because of the courage it frankly takes to raise this as BIPOC students. And then, I mean, I don't have to tell you the rest of this, like the risk it creates about us actually being campuses that BIPOC students feel safe to attend with all the other things we're really trying to intentionally do. So.
And we completely agree. So it is of critical importance to us as well. And so we will follow up and Drake will make sure she gets back to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. She's here frequently. I'm here less often, but she's here frequently. We'll make sure.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much for coming. It's been a great conversation and wonderful information you presented to us. Appreciate
Thank you
it
for
so
taking
much.
the time. We really appreciate it. And
Thank you
good
for
luck on the
having
floor
us.
today.
Nice.
Yeah, that is good.